So I was born in Freetown. I lived in Sierra Leone till I was 10. I was moving at a faster pace in the Sierra Leonean media ecosystem. By every standard, I was groundbreaking. I was the first. It was hard. There was no electricity then for sure. Within a year, I was able to double my consulting rate, expanded our portfolio. And once I got the first contract, I then registered my company in Ghana. And that's how Vickie Remoe and Company came to be.
Boom! What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joannis or Joe Hatagwa, and I'm a Sierra Leonean American in West Africa. And if you want to know what it's like to open up a marketing firm in Freetown, Sierra Leone, then this is the video for you. Okay, cool. So today we have Vickie Remoe, where she is going to tell us about her experience opening a marketing company. She's going to go through her entire life so you know more about her, the world famous Vickie Remoe. All of you who are Sierra Leoneans, either living on the continent or in the diaspora, have either read Sweet Salone or worked with her company, VRC Marketing. You guys are going to get a chance to really hear from her experiences and how she got into this industry and built such a business. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
What's up, guys? We are back with another episode of Authentic African Entrepreneurs, and today I am here with Vickie Remoe. So thanks for doing this, Vickie. I appreciate it. Long time coming. We hardly ever overlap in the same country, right? So luckily we're both here in Sierra Leone, and we met last week, and today I wanted to interview Vickie and make sure that our audience knows who Vickie is if you don't already. So before we get into the interview, and you should, we don't. But before we get to the interview, I do want to read off, a little bit of her background. So Vickie tells stories to make Sierra Leone famous to children and adults. She is a multidisciplinary creative using modern and traditional media to share the wonders of Sierra Leone with the world. Hailing from the vibrant city of Freetown, Sierra Leone, she is a multifaceted talent on a mission to reshape perceptions of her homeland. With a rich tapestry of accomplishments, she emerges as a prominent figure in Sierra Leone's cultural and philanthropic landscape. As the host of Make Sierra Leone Famous podcast, Vickie Remoe takes her audience on an enlightening journey into the heart of Sierra Leone's history, culture, and identity. Through engaging conversations, she dismantles the pervasive neo-colonial gaze that has long overshadowed Sierra Leone's post-war narrative, challenges Western stereotypes, and denounces patronizing perspectives. That is a extensive background, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that today. And so I'm excited to have Vickie here with us today.
Do people still raise the roof?
No.
Okay. Is this what they do now?
Yeah, some of that. Some people do that. They do that. There's a lot of that these days. Your background is interesting, and we're going to start from the very beginning. So I'd love to start with where you were born and where you were raised.
So I was born in Freetown, actually not too far away from where we're recording this. And I lived in Sierra Leone till I was 10. And my father's a police officer, my mom, a diplomat. So I left Sierra Leone when I was 10 to move to Ethiopia, where she was stationed at the embassy. And then, I like to think of myself as a police officer's daughter, diplomat's daughter.
Yeah.
And then from Ethiopia, I moved to the U.S., went to high school in PG County. And then, so I feel like I consider myself a child very much of the diaspora.
Okay.
Someone who is, I think while I am, I was born in Sierra Leone, but I think I'm very culturally American.
Sure.
And so my identity kind of continues to straddle both places actively. And I feel like that's probably it in a nutshell.
That makes sense. So for post-secondary education, you went to university in the States, right?
I did. I went to Haverford College, which is a small Quaker liberal arts school in Pennsylvania, 20 minutes outside of Philly. I really loved it there. It was a great place, really supportive. Not the most diverse, but definitely a place that's aware of its shortcomings. So, they were doing diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff before it was a thing. It was just already a part of the culture at the college. So that means, so like I was president of like our Black Students Organization on campus, and like got into like a lot of activism while I was on campus, and also just being globally focused with what was going on in Sierra Leone at the time. I was always able to get or mobilize resources on campus to come back to Sierra Leone to do work. So I feel like, going to Haverford really helped maintain my connection with Sierra Leone, because when I could apply for grants to come home and volunteer. I could raise funds on campus and for Sierra Leone, because at the time we had a lot of internally displaced people in Freetown who had moved here because of the civil war from other parts of the country. So yeah, I went to undergrad at Haverford, and then high school was definitely PG County Central High School. I was in the International Baccalaureate program. I had a full ride to Haverford thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I don't know if they still do that. They used to do like a Millennium Scholars program for students of color that basically would get you a full ride. So that's why I got to go to college. And then from there, moved to New York City. Well, I'd already moved to New York City before that, because I had a family in New York, in Harlem. And so when I graduated from undergrad, moved to Harlem, worked for the New York State Department of Health for about a year. And while I was there, I was just like very agitated about so the big issue that was happening at my job was that there were a lot of budget cuts to HIV/AIDS funding. And like, this is like millions and millions of dollars, right? But even with the budget cuts, there were still millions and millions and millions of dollars. So the thing that I struggled with at the job was like coming to terms with like the abundance of resources in the US, and then comparing to the fact at the time Sierra Leone had like the worst maternal mortality outcomes in the world. So it was like working in a place where you're coming and people are arguing over millions and millions of dollars, and like what looked like an abundance of like resources. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but we have nothing, you know what I mean? And so that really, just like cognitive dissonance, where I'm just like, no, this does not make sense. Like, right. I cannot be here and like trying to get riled up about budget cuts when, I mean, I know within context of the U.S. situation, but that's the thing, right? My identity is always straddling both places. So it's not just about being aware of what's going on in the U.S., but what's going on here on the continent. And so I was just like, I just need to go back to Sierra Leone and go do my part. But even before I moved, I was always very active with community building, community engagement. We would plan events in the city to bring Sierra Leoneans together. At that time, I'd already started my blog, sweetsalone.com. I started in undergrad in like 2005. And so by then I was already kind of using it to amplify bits of Sierra Leone that I would find on the web, of Sierra Leonean achievers or Sierra Leone achievement or news, just giving my thoughts and opinions. So that kind of got like a couple of, I had some readers. This was, before social media. So it wasn't like you were getting like all these, it was like, if 100 people, 500 people came to your website and read, and, if there was like 10 comments, you were like, oh my God, this is great. But like, yeah, I used to send out email updates a lot to people that I knew about what was going on, about people of Sierra Leone ancestry in the US especially. Yeah. And so, yeah, that kind of got me connected to a lot of people who are now, I guess, key figures in our community, because I knew them way back when, and we were all kind of on the same scene.
Right. Okay, and so that's undergrad. In between undergrad and grad school, you were coming back and forth?
Yeah, so I actually moved to Sierra Leone I was planning to come for a year. I moved to Sierra Leone in 2007 with the plan of being in Sierra Leone for a year. My 1-year sojourn turned to 4. So I stayed in I was going back to the US, but like I was spending most of my time here in Sierra Leone. And when I came back, I convinced my best friend, who was a fashion designer, and we had lived in Paris together, and like I'd watched her passion and talent for the craft. And I just felt like there was this thing that she had about like, she really loved Karl Lagerfeld, and she was hoping that like after grad school, after she finished, she went to Parsons in Paris. She was hoping that after Parsons, she would get a job to work for Karl Lagerfeld. And I was like, well, why don't you just start your own line? And then I distinctly remember her saying, I don't want people to think like I'm just an African designer. Emphasis on African, in the sense that she thought that she was concerned that if she created her own line, that people will think of her as an African designer. And I know for some people listening to this right now, be like, what do you mean? But this is like 2005. The world in 2005 is not the world in 2023 in terms of Africa's place in the global marketplace with fashion or music, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I remember vividly this conversation in Paris. Like, I literally had to fight with her. Like, you do realize Karl Lagerfeld is a German designer, right? And the only Calvin Klein is an American designer. Burberry is a British designer. The only reason why they don't hyphenate in front of designers because they're the ones telling their story. So when a German person is talking about Karl Lagerfeld, they're normalizing themselves. And I was like, it's actually white privilege that allows white people to be able to consistently be the center and us the periphery. And so I was just like, it is perfectly okay for you to be an African designer, and that actually will be your thing and not like a handicap. It took a long time of convincing. We went back to New York and, she was still toying with the idea. And I remember, for people who are familiar with Harlem, we were coming from Les Ambassades, which is on 119th and Frederick Douglass. And we were walking back uptown to Sugar Hill, where I live, and where we lived at the time, actually. We were just like a block away from each other. And I was just like, you know what, Adama, I'm just like really sick of this. Like, it's either you're gonna be who you are or you're not. Like, at the time, I had just finished reading Uchi Emecheta's The Joys of Motherhood. She's a Nigerian author. And as we were talking, she was just like, well, what would I call it? Like, what would I even call it? You know what I mean? And I was like, you will call it Ashobi Designs. And she was like, what? Why would I call it that? Like, I was like, duh. Like, like have this whole thing. And I was like, it's Ashobi Designs because, in Sierra Leone, we wear Ashobi to show that we're family and we belong together. And Nigerians also have the same thing. They call it Ashoebi. I say, but it's like the same concept, right? And I was like, I just read it in this book. It's basically like you'll have the Sierra Leone market, you'll have the Nigerian market. I was like, listen, it's done. It still took some time. So when I came in 2007, I was like, listen, Adama, you need to come back to Sierra Leone. We need to come do Ashobi. And eventually she came and we started the company together. And then I also was working for like a tech startup from another friend who lived in the US, but like was doing business here, and did that for a bit. And then after that, I segued into TV. And then, I just started this television show, the Vickie Remoe show, which at the time was on like the Sierra Leone equivalent of PBS, Sierra Leone Broadcasting Service. At the time, it's now Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation. And I just started telling stories about topical issues initially, but then later on I decided, sitting in a studio or a makeshift studio trying to tell stories about what was going on in Sierra Leone wasn't realistic, that I needed to go on location and be on the road. So then my show, by the second season, transitioned into this like travel show that was, I tell people like it's a mix between Parts Unknown and the Oprah Winfrey Show, because it's these conversations and scenes and sights of Sierra Leone. And then eventually we went on the road to Mali and Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria. Like I really just kind of like grew it beyond borders. So did that for several years. And then, so I was moving at a faster pace in the Sierra Leonean media ecosystem. And, by every standard, like I was groundbreaking. I was the first. I was, we were the pilgrims. And so it was hard. The technical skills weren't here. The market for it wasn't there here. And, one thing I always joke about is like, people think that there's no electricity now, but like there was no electricity then for sure. Right. And so you're talking about, you're selling a product which in order for people to consume, they need to have access to something very fundamental, which is electricity, and they don't have it. So I would go to advertisers and they would say, yeah, this is good, but people then don't get lights. So how are they going to watch your show on TV? And I would say, yeah, gotcha. Nice. So I did that for 4 seasons.
Okay.
And eventually just decided like it's not growing at a faster pace. But I also felt if this was going to be my vocation, my first degree was in political science.
Okay.
And I felt like if this was going to be my vocation, I needed to take it up. I need to learn storytelling. Like there's an art to practice. And people told me I didn't need to go to journalism school. I have friends now people who were serving as mentors at the time who were journalists who told me, Vickie, you're doing so well. You don't need to go to journalism school. Like you're already on the way. But, I was like, no, the thing that you went to learn that you now feel like I have, the fact that I'm not even conscious that I'm already doing it is even more reason why I need to go to journalism school.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, so I didn't do any research about journalism schools. I was walking again from Harlem to Morningside, and we came across Columbia's campus, and I was like, and we randomly just wandered into the campus and walked by the School of Journalism, and there's a bust of Pulitzer right in front of the building.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, if I just come Columbia,
Nice. Must be nice.
I should just come here. I should just come to Columbia. What is it? I entered there. I went to the admissions office. I'm like, tell me about your journalism program.
Okay.
And they did. And I came back and I was like, in fact, it's the #1 journalism program in the school. So in the countries, in the world, said, forget, this is where I'm coming. Literally came home, decided I was going to apply to Columbia, did the preliminary application stuff, whatever. And then I completely forgot that there was a writing test.
Okay.
And there was a deadline for the writing test. And it's very funny because at the time I was producing, it was the MTV Africa Music Awards.
Okay.
And I had been hired by a phone company in Sierra Leone to go to Nigeria to cover it.
Okay.
And it was like party after party.
I can imagine.
Listen, it was Dirty December. We were in it. It was in Lagos. I completely forgot about my writing test until randomly I'm at my friend's apartment. And we're just watching TV, And then it was like, oh my God, I have a writing test. Oh my God, it's due at midnight. The only thing that saved me was the time difference because Nigeria was about 6 or 5 hours ahead of the US.
Sure. Yeah.
And almost as soon as I said that, I had my laptop. I was like, I need to do this. She had a blackout. And so couldn't do it. And so she had to call some guy she was saying came to pick us up, went to his house. They were making lovey-dovey on the sofa. I was over there trying to type my essay. do my writing test. And I did it and I submitted it. And I got accepted. I used Reels for my show to apply. And I got accepted. And 2020, when did I leave Sierra Leone? So I came in 2007. I came in the summer of 2007. I left in the summer of 2011 to go to graduate school. And that's how I ended up at Columbia. I did Columbia for a year. And then after that, I decided that, I wasn't going to come back to Sierra Leone because I already knew that the 1 year I'd spent away was not enough for new growth or anything new to happen in the industry for me to return to work here in the media and for it to be lucrative, et cetera, because it's all fun and games to be doing something out of passion. But if your passion can't sustain you, you still need to worry about your livelihood. And as a young woman in West Africa, I always tell people, for me, the most important value is freedom. And how you get your freedom here or increase your freedom and choices is by gaining financial security and financial independence. So I could not return to Sierra Leone because I knew for a fact that if I came back to do my TV show, I would not be able to grow it and it would not be able to sustain me financially. So I was like, I'm not doing the show anymore. Decided to move to Ghana instead because my mom was actually with the Sierra Leone embassy there. So she already had a house and everything. So
What year was this?
I went to Ghana. I finished graduate school in 2012. So that was 11 years ago.
Okay.
And I went to, So I had been going to Ghana. It wasn't my first time there or anything. So I'd been on the scene, made friends, connected with so many different artists and creatives.
Yeah.
So it was really easy to, it just felt like a place that people like me, creatives and entrepreneurs were doing.
Right.
right? Not even smooth. It was just that like there was a community of doers.
Okay.
And I felt like if I came here, unlike in Sierra Leone where I'm one of one, in Ghana I won't be one of one. So if I want to do anything here, there'll be other people within the ecosystem that I could partner with, grow with, learn from, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just felt like a better place for me, because it doesn't matter how great you are and how talented you are and how much everything you are. If the environment that you're in cannot sustain your growth, you will die. And I needed to grow. So that's why I chose Ghana over Sierra Leone. Yeah.
So there was a couple things that you said there that we just kind of breezed past. Number one, you were into branding very early, even before you knew it, in terms of the SOB business, right? Giving the name, expressing how important it is to be an African designer.
Absolutely. I've always been, I think the difference between, I would say I was like an early adopter of the Africa is the future narrative, or the future is African, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a big part of that probably comes from two things. One, growing up as a diplomat's daughter and being able to, to live in the world and interact with the world from a place where lots of the people that you're interacting with at African intelligentsia, African elites. So like it's living a life where Africans are doing and achieving. So like I don't have a reason to have low self-esteem about my identity, about being African or Sierra Leonean, because like me, I don't know about you, but everybody I know that's African is like great. Which I'm not saying that everybody is, but it's just that like I had a lot of confidence about the value of being African. I didn't think of Africa as the dark continent.
Right.
And then later on, of course, my education helped to solidify that.
Right.
And also just believing in this like global African identity and the global African diaspora. I mean, once I got, in high school, because I was in the international baccalaureate tract, we didn't do American history. We did history of the Americas,
right,
which included like, the Haitian Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, African American history, and slavery, like the transatlantic slave trade. And I feel like that kind of formation really helped to like give me a global identity and appreciation for what it means to be an African person in today's world, that like, yes, our story did not start at slavery. And the other thing is, as a Sierra Leonean, I always tell people that being a Sierra Leonean and also being like a person of Creole ancestry in Sierra Leone, it gives you a sense of identity that is like the 360 of global Black identity, right? Because being a Creole descendants in Freetown, we are descendants of either slaves that were people that were captured and enslaved, taken to the New World, freed or fought for their freedom, got emancipation, moved to Canada or in the Caribbean, or who were in the Caribbean and got emancipation, and got on boats and ships and sailed to Freetown to set a new community of freed men, like formerly enslaved people. Or the other part of our ancestry is that we are freed recaptives, Africans who were captured from along the coast of the continent. Specifically, my ancestry, actually, the part that I do know from my Cree ancestry, comes directly from Nigeria. On my father's side, his paternal side, was captured as a slave.
Okay.
Captured and enslaved on a slave ship, headed for the New World. That boat got intercepted and it was docked at Freetown. He got off the boat and the governor, and so when the British abolished slavery, anytime they would catch slave ships leaving the coast, because the British Navy would then patrol the coast, they would come and free them in this colony called Freetown. And so my dad's great-great-grandfather gets freed in Freetown. When he arrived here, his last name was Ifeyibi. From Nigeria, he was Yoruba. When he arrived, he converted to Christianity, and he took the last name of the governor of Freetown at the time, whose last name was O'Doherty. So he changed his last name from Ifeyibi to Doherty. He goes back to Nigeria. And in Nigeria today, in Lagos, the Doherty family is a very prominent family. In fact, one of my dad's half-brothers, ran for president against Tinubu.
Okay.
You know, anybody who is from Lagos, you say J.H. Duarte or his children, the Duarte family is one family, and they all descended from this person, this recaptive. And so as a person of Creole ancestry in Freetown, our story is literally captured, enslaved, emancipated, came back to Africa, and started a new life.
Right.
So it's very easy for me to have a global African identity, because being Creole means that, like, yeah, you global. Your ancestors are global. And so, yeah, my identity has always been rooted in that. And it's always something that I take a lot of pride from and not shy away from. So even in the US, when I was in high school, I remember, you know, people talk about this. This is a theme on Black Twitter all the time, right? About this competition or discussion or real or fake conversation around Africans' perceived betterment in comparison to African Americans, right? They're like, oh, Africans think they're better than us. Yeah. So when I was in high school, you know, and I came with this, like, I'm from Africa and Africa's a great place. And, you know, I didn't have any like negative, I didn't feel small about my African identity. It was off-putting to, like, I remember having one teacher who was put off by it, so much so that she complained to another teacher of mine, who then told me, like, do you know that Miss So-and-so thinks you think that you're better than everybody else?
What?
And I remember saying, it was so funny, I was like, but some people are just better.
Oh.
But what she didn't understand is that I didn't think I was better because I was African. I just thought I was better because I'm my parents' daughter. Like, you know, that's how we're raised, right? And so that's how, you know, I'm like, I'm a diplomat's daughter. I come with grace. I come with purpose. Why are you here wasting my time teaching me this? Like, why are we learning about this? We should be learning about, you know, I was that kind of person. So, like, yeah, no, she was really annoyed by me. So, no, I just say that, like, to say that, you know, I know a lot of Africans in the diaspora, a lot of Sierra Leoneans in the diaspora, because their identity is directly related to the stories they hear, the news. And so every time they hear something negative about Sierra Leone or the continent, they feel less proud about being from that place or saying from that place. And because I feel like my whole life, I've just never felt not proud.
Right.
About being an African person or a Sierra Leonean person. And that's why my work is in this field of, like, debunking these narratives, one-dimensional narratives, or telling stories about Sierra Leone away from the neo-colonial gaze, or, you know, pick me. I always say it's like pick me culture, where, like, you're trying to impress people that, oh, your country is great, please come and see us. I say, don't come, we are great. It's still great. You come is great. You don't come is great. Like, we are a great people. Our food is great. You eat it, good. You don't eat it, it is still the best. Our beaches, our landscape, our fauna and flora is fantastic. You like it? No problem. I like it. It is fabulous. So that's kind of like, you know, and also I think that a lot of times when we tell narratives that are for the white gaze, we actually diminish and reduce what makes us who we are. I believe that the stuff that is most local, meaningful, and fascinating for us is what we should amplify, and not necessarily, like, instead of, like, going to fit into somebody else's version and, like, tweak ourselves for them. Let's take the things that's very odd, that makes us stand apart, that's the most ostentatious thing, and let's use that to brand ourselves. Because I think that all the great civilizations of the world, their contributions have not been the things that are most like others. It has been the things that has been most different.
Yes.
When people think of Japanese people, they think of, like, kimonos. They think of, like, culture and, like, discipline and, like, reverence for the tradition, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, yeah, that's theirs. Sierra Leone should not be trying to do that.
Right.
Do you understand what I mean? We should look at what is our own thing and embrace it.
I agree. And so the storytelling and the real confidence of self and country, I think all kind of it weaves throughout your career. Now you went to, and you did breeze over the Columbia School of Journalism. Let me tell you guys something. Columbia is very big on explaining how difficult it is to get into that school. It's like
Yeah, they say like, oh, we only have a 7% acceptance rate or a 10%, that kind of thing. Like that. It's okay. It's fine. But I'm from Sierra Leone. Of course, they would accept me. They're very easy. Why would they not? I'm also Vickie Remoe. Like, why?
There it is.
I just said this is where I'm going. I didn't apply anywhere because I said if they don't accept me, it means that what I'm doing is not yet ready for me to go. If the best place is going to look at my work and say, we don't think you belong here, I need to do more work. So I saw it more as like a litmus test and not so much like, oh, I must go there. Much more like, let me see if what I'm doing is good enough.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
So if they hadn't accepted me, I would just continue doing work and applied again.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
Because I think sometimes if this is the best place for this thing, right? And you are convinced it is the best, gets to the level.
There it is.
You know?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
just
so
get to the level.
Get to the level.
Yeah.
So you did a year?
Yeah, it's a 1-year journalism. It's very intensive because it's literally you go to classes from 9 to 5.
Okay.
For 11 months.
One of my favorite podcasters went there, Kara Swisher. She always talked about the how difficult it was. And how difficult it was to get in.
It's a hard program. It is a gruesome blood, sweat, and tears program. Like, it's painful.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's painful. It's a hard program. It makes you though like it literally like if you can get, and I was in they have many different tracks. I was in the broadcast track, so for video, for TV, and which between that and there's one also data journalism or data visualization, I think. I think the broadcast track because from our track is where people go to do like long form documentary, et cetera. It's hard. Because I will tell you, I did weep on more than one occasion out reporting stories.
Okay.
I did weep. I had an awesome professor, June Cross, who, man, she was hard on me. Thank you, though, Auntie June. I thought she ate it.
But sometimes you need that, right?
She kicked my butt. It was so hard on me. I will never forget, like, her first evaluation of my work was just like, I will never forget this. She wrote, because it's like written evaluations, right? So this is like midway through the first quarter. And she's like, I know you're probably used to just being the star where you're from, but here, before you get to the level that you think you are, you need to be a lot more accomplished than you are right now. Sick burn. She cut me. She was just like, Madam, I know you think you've arrived. You have not arrived. Please. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously that was an experience that probably shaped and molded.
Yeah.
Days of your
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the people that work for me now, I definitely treat them like
You learned a lot.
June Cross taught me. Like, I'm hard on them like that. If you don't like it, you won't stay.
But I would say, just being in the office, I've been in a lot of offices, and many people have a lot of idle time. People are productive here. I see people actually working. So clearly, it's permeated as well.
Listen. I used to have a team of 8.
Okay.
Now we have a team of 3.
Okay.
And it's because people come, and I think the misperception around the media or digital is that it looks lighthearted. When you see the published or produced product,
Sure.
It's not always clear or obvious the amount of work that went into it. So it's easy for people to assume that it is an easy job.
Right.
And unfortunately for them, they come to my company and they learn like, you have just fucked around and now you're about to find out. And when they find out, they just usually are like, I'm not going able this work I at. and then they leave.
And then they leave.
Yeah, it's not for the weak. It's not for the weak.
So, and I do want to get back to VRC in a moment, but I want to, how do we get there? So you go to Ghana.
I go to Ghana.
I noticed you did a bunch of contract work.
So I go to Ghana, and the first thing I did was to hit up a TV station and to say, hey, I'm a TV producer. I'm a TV host from Sierra Leone. Do you have any opportunities for producers? And they said, that's nice. We don't pay producers here in that way. Like we can't hire you as a producer, but your CV's nice. And then I brought my CV, whatever. And I think I may or may not have left a reel. And then a week later, he called me and he's like, I see you have some fashion experience on your CV. I'm like, yep. My friend and I started this fashion company in Sierra Leone. And he was like, I have a friend who is in textiles that may need someone of your expertise.
Okay.
That friend ended up being the owner of a Ghanaian textile company called Printex. It's one of the oldest in the market. It's been around for over 4 or 5 decades. And he introduced me to the owner, and the owner was looking for someone to potentially help them with branding, more from the side of like, give us strategy. And so, yeah, I went to it was a consulting thing, like a short-term thing.
Sure.
I think it was like for 3 months, see what you can do, what you learn, and da-da-da. So I did a lot of research, and I developed a deck for him when he came back, did a presentation, made suggestions for how they could grow their brand and elevate it, looked at their competitors, et cetera, et cetera. And when I finished my presentation, he was like, I don't have anyone who can implement this. Can you do it? And I was like, sure. And he said, how much would it cost? And I called a number, and he said, okay, anything else? I was like, yep, I'm gonna need an assistant, but I'll need for you to pay them. He's like, sure. I said, I'm gonna need a graphic designer. I need for you to pay them. He said, okay. And once I got that from him, gentleman's agreement, we shook on it. Within a year, I was able to double my rate, my consultant rate with him, expanded our portfolio with them because they had multiple companies to include like 2 other brands. So I handled 3 brands for them, 1 in textiles and 2 in consumer goods. They have 2 juice brands, Fratelli and Calipo. And for about 4 to 5 years, I handled everything marketing and comms for Calipo and Fratelli and Printex until I resigned from 2012 to 2017.
Okay.
And during that time, basically once I got the first contract with him, I then registered my company in Ghana, and that's how Vickie Remoe and Company came to be.
Nice. Yeah. So VRNC. And so on that note, what do you do today? What does VRNC do today? I know that obviously started in one area.
Yeah.
It's evolving over time, right?
Sure. So, our bread and butter over the past couple of years has been marketing and communications consulting for SMEs, startups, and development communications for NGOs. So I've probably worked for over 50 different companies and brands in the last decade, helping them develop strategy to reach either new customers or audiences, both online and offline, across the sub-region. And, I just finished building our headquarters here in Freetown.
Sure.
5-year building project, slowed down significantly because of the pandemic. So we're still kind of in the same business, really. That's our bread and butter. But now we're kind of moving towards more content production for audiences and less reliance on retainer business, just because the economy here isn't growing as fast as we would like.
Right.
And also just doing, in-house production work. So making the podcast or, doing content marketing.
Okay. Now on the topic of the podcast, right? So make Salon famous. Could we talk a little bit about how it came to be and what can people expect from the podcast?
Sure. So actually in 2018, I brought my TV show back, the Vickie Remoe show, after a 7-year hiatus. Took that on the road in Sierra Leone and I just used the existing equipment that I had. Then for the following year, I decided I really need new equipment. So I launched a crowdfunding campaign. And what I asked people to do then was to help me to make Sierra Leone famous for the right reasons, with the show, the Vickie Remoe show being the vehicle. In 30 days, I raised about $15,000, and we were able to buy some additional equipment. And so that season then was the Make Sierra Leone Famous season. We were traveling to every province in Sierra Leone to do so. Unfortunately, that COVID happened. And while we were on the road for the show, we basically had to stop.
Sure.
So we never completed that season. And so, just being here stuck, no clients, whatever, no work during the pandemic, I decided that, okay, if we can't complete the season, what can we do? And so what we started doing was repurposing, because, the actual show itself is like a 30-minute TV show.
Sure.
But some of the conversations we had some really great conversations that had to end up in the editing room floor because we only are doing a 30-minute show. So we went back and I started let's recompose or repurpose these conversations that I had really enjoyed for a podcast. And so the Vickie Remoe show content for that season that season's thing was to make Sierra Leone famous. We took that and used that as the podcast, right? So we took the conversations, converted them, made them into evergreen podcast content, and then recorded a couple few to end. So that's how the Make Sierra Leone Famous podcast came about.
Nice. And I saw the message that you sent out for people to interview. And then, of course, I was here once when a few people came in. So can we talk about some of the people who they can expect to hear from and what kind of topics?
So this is our third season, and we've changed the format. So the format previously was one-on-one conversations.
Sure.
They were always about the people who were coming. So the episodes were about the people or about history or about culture. But this new season is more topical. So we're looking at pop issues, cultural issues, sociocultural issues in Sierra Leone of the day, and talking to people who are either experts or have experiences that could shed light on different ways of thinking or addressing the issues that are existing. So we have a show on drug addiction because there's a really big addiction problem in Sierra Leone right now, both with drugs and alcohol. We also have a show about beauty queens in Sierra Leone and just the rise of the beauty pageantry industry. We also have an episode around exporting Sierra Leone music. And specifically that's because as I see everybody's seen the explosion of Afrobeats.
Sure.
And I think that the challenge for a lot of African countries, smaller markets like Sierra Leone, is a lot of artists are thinking about, I want to be the next Wizkid, I want to be the next Davido. And what they think they need to do is then to sound like Wizkid and sound like Davido and to make Afro beats. And my thing is that perhaps what people need to think about instead, at least from the Sierra Leonean perspective or the Liberian perspective, is what existing musical forms do you have within your culture that you can use to create not the next Afrobeat sensation, but the next genre,
right,
as in Amapiano, right? How can you, instead of looking for the next hot Afrobeats track, how do you create the next genre of music that's going to be a global sensation where it's not just that you've created a hit song, it's that you've created a new way to make music, right? Where now Beyonce and Wizkid are coming to you because you're the source of the sauce. And I think that, and so that's one of the conversations I will be having about music. So in general, it's a bunch of different issues that I feel for our Gen Z and millennial audience, both here in the diaspora, they're things they're already grappling with and thinking about. And so I think I don't want to give away who our guests will be because we're still in production. I don't want to call somebody's name and then they never come for the show and you're oh, but you said somebody was coming. They're not coming. But no, those are some of the topics that we'll have.
Nice. And like I said, everything you do is weaves in this expression of Sierra Leone. So I also want to talk about the Sweet Salone blog and sites, because I think this is also really interesting just in terms of what you're doing there and contributors that you have. So can we talk about the blog itself and what categories are there? How can people submit content, all that kind of stuff?
Okay. So we cover everything to do with pop culture and entertainment in Sierra Leone.
Sure.
And again, our audience there is millennials and Gen Z, people at home and in the diaspora. One of the things that's very pervasive in media coverage of Sierra Leone, if it's international, it's usually death, disaster, and destruction. Or even if it's a good news story, it's always from this juxtaposition of the rose that grew from concrete. Oh, Sierra Leone is such a dark place. Look at this one person who's doing so well. So those are the narratives that are international. And then locally, the narratives are so predominantly political that if you're not a politician, a government somebody, you could be doing great work and barely any recognition on media coverage. And so one of the things that I'm very intentional with about the blog and always have been is that it must represent people who are in arts and culture, entertainment, entrepreneurship. I want to know like what Sierra Leonean millennials and Gen Z people are doing, what they're talking about. So we are probably the least politics or government focused media platform where we really just focus on storytelling from a Sierra Leonean perspective to a Sierra Leonean perspective. My mission has always been like, how do I expand Sierra Leone's presence online? And whether it's the podcast, whether it's photography, whether it's a Vickie Remoe show or the Sweet Salone blog, it's always about how do we expand Sierra Leone's presence on the web, not just projecting Sierra Leone, but projecting Sierra Leonean perspectives, Sierra Leonean doers for a Sierra Leonean audience with a Sierra Leonean lens, right? It's like, you know, when they say like, this is for the American people, our content there is for the Sierra Leonean people.
Nice. All right, so we talked a lot about your background, your career, and also what you're currently doing. I'd love to start talking a little bit about some of the advice and challenges, because I know this is something that people always ask about coming to the continent, right? So obviously, as someone who has been back and forth, I think my first question around these topics would be, what is the biggest challenge you would say having started your business in Ghana and expanding to Sierra Leone?
Oh, I think it's simple. I think it's currency depreciation. I think that, especially in the last 24 months, Ghana and Sierra Leone both have had like two of the world's worst performing currencies, which means that no matter how much you're earning here locally, the rate of depreciation is like really, really fast. I'll just give you an example. Sign a contract with a client. 1 year later, it had depreciated by 100%. And I had to write the client and just say, listen, if you truly want us to continue to provide the service, you have to pay us at today's rates, like dollar exchange rate, and not at what we agreed, because otherwise I can't pay my staff a living wage. That's the other thing for me is that so minimum wage in Sierra Leone is very low. It's not even like $100. It's maybe like $50 or even less. I pay a living wage, which means that I peg my staff salaries to the US dollar. And so whatever happens with no matter what's going on locally, if the dollar is up or down, they're getting something equivalent to like dollars, right? So that means that every time the dollar changes significantly, I will bump their salary up to match that period's existing dollar exchange rate. But in order to do that, my clients then must pay me to that. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's possible. So that's how we do it. So that would be definitely the most challenging thing.
Okay. And what advice would you give anyone? You live in Ghana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ghana, but sometimes Maryland.
Yeah, so I'm between the US and Ghana. I actually spend the least time in Sierra Leone of all. I split my time between the US and Ghana.
Okay, so advice you would give to anyone planning to move to either Ghana or Sierra Leone that's out there in the West. Most of the people watching this are...
I think it definitely depends who you are.
Okay.
So if you are a Sierra Leonean native trying to move back to Sierra Leone, I would say the most important thing that would determine whether your move back will be successful is your existing support network in Sierra Leone. And that, do you have family? Do you have a place to stay? Like, do you have a car? Like, whatever ecosystem you have in the US that supports your life there, if you don't have your success, your moving back success, which would be you move back and you stay, depends on how much a support structure or ecosystem you have to support you with whatever venture or work you're doing here. And that's on a personal level. For let's say for African Americans in the diaspora who are looking to move back to the continent, I think that what they will find is that they will be on a privileged side of things that they may not necessarily are aware of. So you become the man, as in the white man. white privilege. You now come with American privilege, right? And so that's just something that how you choose to use that privilege will determine a big part of your experience locally. And also, I think for African Americans moving to the continent, I don't believe that there are any easy solutions on the continent to fix, and we have lots of problems.
Sure.
Lots and lots of problems. And I think that if you're looking for a utopia on the continent, you certainly won't find that. What you will find is that, yes, when you move back home, you will not have to deal with racial politics, right? But you will have to deal with some kind of politics, because all politics truly is local. And no matter where you are, you will get fixed into a certain kind of politics, because that's just how human beings are. So just being conscious of that, right? And also that your displacement, your returning, can cause displacement within the local economy and the local power structure. So for example, as an African American person, you who can afford to move to Ghana, right? Or Sierra Leone or Africa, if you can afford it, it already means that you're either middle class or upper middle class, sure, right? And so you're already coming from a place of wealth, et cetera, et cetera. So if you move back, your moving back means that you're coming with so many more resources than the average native person where you're moving back to. It means that because of you, it's going to be harder for locals to be able to access affordable housing, because just like gentrification in the US, you're now going to move into places and basically you spoil the market,
yes,
right? For locals, they now can afford to buy things because now you become the customer, the customer that everybody wants, right? That's the same for restaurants and even tailors and fashion designers. I can't get no Christy Brown anymore because y'all done driven the price up. Shout out to Christy Brown. It's my favorite Ghanaian brand. But no, it's when I used to buy Christy Brown before, it was $85, $100, I was there. $150, I was there. Even $200, I was managing. It's now $500, $600, $700, because African Americans have entered with American dollars. I cannot compete. Before I even see it sold out, I said, hey, you people won't leave anything for us, please. So yeah.
And I've noticed a lot of people are charging in dollars now, right?
If the currency is depreciating at such a fast rate, imagine so for example, I don't know how Aisha, who's the fashion designer, Christy Brown, the owner, I don't know how she produces, but think of this, right? Say she's gone overseas and she's imported textiles and zippers and materials. At the time she imports, she's paid X amount, right? She brings them in. By the time she produces the collection, the CD has depreciated 20%, 30%, 40%, right? So how does she then recover? She's already spent the money, right? How do you recover? So unfortunately, business people have to survive. We're not in charity, it's for profit. Yeah.
In real estate too. I mean, in Ghana, I was paying my rent in dollars. For 2 years I paid rent.
Technically, that is illegal.
Yes, I know.
Yes. So you're not supposed to ask people for more than 6 months rent in Ghana. You can actually challenge it. It's illegal if you have the patience to challenge it. And they're not supposed to make you pay in dollars. Yeah.
So there's some other advice there for you.
Yeah. When I got my first place, yes, I was paying in dollars. But by the time I moved to my third place, I refused to negotiate a contract in Ghana in dollars for housing. So I locked in my contract in cedis. And I remember, but he lost in a way, because when we signed the contract, it was $600 at the time, but 2,400 cedis, right, was my rent. By a year later, I was still paying 2,400 cedis, but it was no longer $600 because of the currency depreciation. Yeah, so you gotta, wherever you fall, you have to play the card for that role, right? As a business person, you want to make a profit. As a consumer, you don't want to make contractual agreements that are not in your favor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last question I have around those topics is advice for businesses. Anyone who wants to start a business on the continent. So we talk about people who want to move. So many of you have talked about wanting to start businesses here. And since you have a business in 2 countries, I think you have a unique perspective. So starting a business in Ghana versus starting a business in Sierra Leone, or running a business in Ghana or Sierra Leone.
I think the easiest thing to do, really, if you're in a sector that's not heavily regulated, is to start. It's very easy to start. It'd be so easy to start. You'd be like, oh, okay, just like register my business, I've started.
Yeah.
I think the key challenge for a lot of people from the diaspora, and this sometimes works and this sometimes doesn't work, is they have a business idea that is formed from the diaspora.
Sure.
Meaning, I think this will be a good idea in Ghana or Sierra Leone because no one there is doing it. And I always say, instead of saying this thing isn't there, so it'll do well, I'll be the first person to bring it. It might be. The other thing to ask is, what kind of ecosystem does this business need to grow?
Right.
What what partners do I need? What raw materials or resources do I need? What skill sets do I need for this business to grow? And if you can't answer that easily, and if everything that your business needs to grow needs to be imported, it's going to have a negative impact on your business's growth.
Sure.
Right? The other thing I tell people that there are certain things that, unfortunately, because of their nature, you can't do them small scale.
Sure.
Right? There are certain businesses you can't start in this market small scale. It is in the bigness. It's like, so you have to take like a big risk,
sure,
right? Big risk, big reward. That's the kind of market, West Africa is. So it's like, if you want to just do like a small thing, I just want to build a swimming pool, people will be paying small to come and swim in the community. No, build a water park. Like, big risk, big reward. Be the first person to bring like, I don't know, go-karting, right? But big risk, big reward. So it's like those kinds of things that, like, certain things you can like bootstrap, et cetera, but there are just certain things that in this market, it's like people need to see it, right? To believe you can't explain the concept and you sell, let me tell you, the idea, I have this great idea. No, the idea, people have to see it, right? To really believe that it's tangible. So like, those are like, maybe just, if I were to say like, just wrap it up to two, it'd be like, definitely make sure that the ecosystem for your business to grow, not to start. The ecosystem for your business to grow and thrive exists locally,
sure,
right? And then also that if you really want the biggest reward, you have to be willing to take the biggest risks. And probably the last thing is that I think one of the things they teach us in the US that everybody who lives in the US believes almost, in terms of like, because we're all from this capitalist society, is that the most important thing, the most important thing to everyone is like money is enough of an incentive. That if I just pay somebody more, they'll work harder. That if I just pay somebody more, but I'm giving you more money. Like, what else do you want? What can be very frustrating as an employer sometimes is you could have the best offering, but you still can't get the best from your workers. And that's oftentimes because they do not have a capitalist mindset. It's not just all about the money. It's about so many other things.
Yeah, well put. I think we covered a broad range of topics. I think the last thing I just want to ask you is, where can they find VRC, Sweet Salone, and the Mix Salone Famous podcast?
It's really, I always tell people, like, if you can find me, you can find everything else. So it's like, I'm Vickie Remoe across all platforms. Sweet Salone also across, and it's SWIT SALONE. And, Make Sierra Leone Famous podcast is on all like the podcast streaming. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's also on AudioMac because that's what most people here use.
Sure.
And then the Vickie Remoe Show, you can just Google it. It's on YouTube. And if you go to my website, VickieRemoe.com, it'll connect you to other stuff. And so, and the latest thing that I'm working on actually is launching a Digital Communications Institute. So learndigitalcommunications.org, because one of the things that I've learned over the years being here is just like the skill sets for digital are just not readily available locally on the continent. And so I want to make sure that people, especially people who are studying comms or journalism, are getting the digital skills they need to basically augment their skill sets.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll see you all on the next episode.
All right, cool. So that was Vickie Remoe's story. Did you guys find it interesting? If you did, leave us a comment below. If there are any questions that you had for Vickie that I didn't ask, put that in the comments. Give us a thumbs up. Share this with anybody you know who are thinking about building a business outside of the nonprofit NGO sector. Somebody who's actually trying to build a for-profit business in Sierra Leone. Definitely send this to them so you can get an idea of what it's like to build a business. So, see you guys all in the next video. All right, guys, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, like, comment, and share it with your friends. All right, see you on the next video.